My wife called me at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday and told me to keep my mouth shut, and I said, "Got it," because I have been keeping my mouth shut for 27 years, and I am very, very good at it. Tonight, you can join my brother's fiancé's family for dinner, but keep your mouth shut. Why? Her dad's a judge, Judge Kincaid. He's very respected, very important. Lawton is trying to make a good impression, and I don't want you talking about property management or that building you were working on last month. Just sit there, eat, smile, and don't embarrass us like you always do. Got it? I mean it, Calder. This is important to Lawton. The Kincaids are connected. This dinner could help his career. Don't screw it up. I said, got it, Lorraine. And wear the navy blazer, not the polo. The blazer. And don't bring up the truck. Nobody wants to hear about your truck. No truck talk. And don't. Lorraine, I will sit there. I will eat my steak. I will smile. I will not talk about property management, my truck, or any building I have ever been inside. I will be invisible. I'm very good at invisible. You know that. She paused. Because she did know that. Lorraine Meade, née Presley, has been married to me for 18 years, and in those 18 years she has introduced me at approximately 200 social functions as my husband, Calder. He's in property management, with the same vocal inflection you might use to introduce a piece of furniture that came with the room. And every single time, I let her. Because the introduction is accurate. I am in property management. I manage properties. 67 of them. Across 3 states, worth approximately $440 million. But Lorraine doesn't know that. Nobody at tonight's dinner knows that. Nobody in my life knows that, except my mother and the man whose courthouse I purchased in 2019 for $14 million and renovated with my own money, a man named Judge Ambrose Kincaid. And tonight, Judge Ambrose Kincaid is going to be sitting at the same dinner table as me. But before I tell you about the dinner, before I tell you about the toast and the silence, and the question that turned the most invisible man at the table into the only person anyone could see, I need to tell you who I am. Both versions. Because there are 2 Calder Meades, and they have been living inside the same body for 27 years, and tonight is the night they finally meet in public. My name is Calder Meade. I was born in 1973 in Petersburg, Virginia, 30 miles south of Richmond, in the part of Virginia that the tourism brochures skip because there are no wineries and no horse farms and no reason for anyone with money to stop. My father, Virgil Meade, was a janitor at a public school. My mother, Opaline, was a cafeteria worker at the same school. Together they made approximately $48,000 a year, which in Petersburg was enough to keep the lights on and the refrigerator stocked, but not enough to keep the worry out of my mother's eyes when September came and the school supply list was longer than the bank account. I grew up watching my parents be invisible. Not ignored, invisible. There is a difference. Ignored means people see you and choose not to engage. Invisible means people look through you, the way you look through a window to see the view on the other side. My father mopped floors that hundreds of people walked across every day, and not one of them knew his name. My mother served lunch to children who said "thank you" to the food, and not to the woman holding the tray. I learned something from watching this. I learned that the world sorts people into 2 categories: people who are seen and people who provide the surface that the seen people stand on. My parents were the surface. The floor, the cafeteria tray, and the people standing on them never looked down. I decided, when I was 15 years old, watching my father buff a gymnasium floor at 10 p.m. on a Friday while the basketball team's parents sat in the bleachers and didn't notice him, that I would never be poor. And I decided something else, something that most people who escape poverty don't decide, because the first thing most people do when they get money is make sure everyone knows they have it. I decided I would be invisible on purpose. Not because I was humble, because I wanted to know. I wanted to know who the people around me really were, not who they performed for the rich, but who they were when they thought no one important was watching. I wanted to know if the world would treat Calder Meade the same way it treated Virgil Meade. And the only way to know that was to never show the money. I didn't go to college, I went to work. At 18, I got a job as a property maintenance technician for a rental company in Richmond. fixing leaky faucets, replacing broken windows, patching drywall. I made $9.50 an hour. I was good at it because I was my father's son, the son of a man who fixed things, who maintained things, who understood that every building is a system, and every system needs someone who pays attention to it. At 22, I saved $18,000. At 25, in 1998, I bought my first property, a duplex in the Churchill neighborhood of Richmond for $62,000. I put $15,000 down. I renovated it myself, every weekend, every evening after work, for 4 months. I rented both units, the rental income covered the mortgage, and left $400 a month profit. $400 a month. That was the seed. And I planted it with the patience of a man who understood that the fastest way to build wealth is slowly. By 2000, I had 4 properties. By 2005, 12. I wasn't buying mansions. I was buying duplexes, small apartment buildings, modest commercial spaces in neighborhoods that were undervalued because the people who valued real estate didn't bother to look at neighborhoods where the residents looked like my parents. I looked. I saw what was coming before the market did, because I had spent my childhood in the places that money eventually discovers, and I knew the signs. In 2005, I created my first shell company, Bridgewater Holdings, LLC, then Tidewater Capital, then Monument Equity Partners, then 11 more over the next 15 years. Each company owned a slice of the portfolio. My name appeared on none of the public filings. In Virginia, LLC ownership is private. The registered agent is listed, not the owner. My registered agent was a law firm in Richmond that handled all my corporate filings and never disclosed my identity. By 2010, I had 30 properties. By 2015, 50. By 2020, 62. By 2025 and today, 67 properties across Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. office towers, retail centers, mixed-use developments, a courthouse. Total portfolio value, approximately $440 million. Annual net income, approximately $28 million. Personal net worth, approximately $440 million. After debt, because I don't carry unnecessary debt, because my father taught me that debt is a floor you don't own, and someday someone will pull it out from under you. I live in a house in Richmond's West End, a 4-bedroom colonial worth $680,000, owned through an LLC, purchased outright with no mortgage. I drive a 2017 Toyota Tacoma with 94,000 miles. I wear khakis and button-downs from Nordstrom Rack. I eat lunch at a diner on Broad Street where the turkey club costs $11.50, and the waitress calls me Hun. I am worth $440 million and nobody knows, except my mother. Opaline Mead, 76 years old, still lives in Petersburg in the same house where I grew up. She knows because mothers know. She noticed the house, no mortgage, the lack of financial stress, ever, and the way I write checks to her church and her neighborhood association without blinking. She asked me once in 2014, "Calder, how much money do you have?" Enough. Enough like comfortable? Or enough like you're hiding something? Both. She looked at me, the way mothers look at sons who are keeping secrets, not with suspicion, but with the particular worry of a woman who knows that secrets have weight and weight breaks things. Does Lorraine know? No. Why not? Because I need to know who she is without it. And, do you know? I know. And the knowing isn't good, Mama, but it's useful. Now let me tell you about the dinner. Because the dinner is where 27 years of invisibility ended in approximately 90 seconds, and the ending was not something I planned. The Jefferson Hotel, West Franklin Street, Richmond, Virginia, one of the finest restaurants in the state, marble columns, a stained glass ceiling, the kind of grandeur that was built in 1895 and has been making people feel important ever since. The reservation was for 7:30 p.m., 8 people. I parked my Tacoma between Lawton's BMW 7 Series and a Mercedes that I assumed belonged to the Kincaids. The valet looked at my truck the way valets look at trucks that arrive at the Jefferson Hotel, with the polite confusion of a man who is paid to park nice cars and isn't sure this qualifies. "Evening, sir. Checking in?" Dinner reservation? Presley party? Of course, sir. I walked into the restaurant. Navy blazer, as instructed. Khakis. A white shirt that Lorraine had ironed because she didn't trust me to iron it, wrinkle-free, which was correct. I cannot iron a shirt wrinkle-free. I can renovate a $14 million courthouse, but I cannot iron a shirt. And this is the kind of information that my wife uses to construct her assessment of my competence. The table was round. 8 seats. Lorraine had arranged the seating. She does this at every dinner, because Lorraine understands that where you sit determines who hears you, and she has spent 18 years making sure I am heard by as few people as possible. I was seated between Rosalind Kincaid, the judge's wife, 66, silver-haired, pearls, the kind of woman who has been married to power for so long that she emits it secondhand, and Graham Kincaid, Sybil's brother, 35, an orthopedic surgeon who had the easy confidence of a man who fixes bones for a living and has never fixed a leaky faucet and never will. At the other end of the table, Judge Kincaid, across from Lawton, the power end, the end where conversations happen that the rest of the table is supposed to overhear and admire but not join. Lorraine introduced me to the table with her standard formulation. This is my husband, Calder. He's in property management. She said it the way she always says it. Quickly, with a downward inflection on property management, the way you say the name of a restaurant you don't recommend. Quick, flat, move on. Judge Kincaid was at the far end. He hadn't looked at me yet. He was engaged in conversation with Lawton about interest rates and economic development, the particular cocktail of topics that ambitious bankers use to impress judges they want to be connected to. I sat, I ate, I smiled. I did not talk about property management. I did not talk about my truck. I did not talk about any building I had ever been inside, which was difficult because I owned 67 of them and had renovated most of them personally. I was invisible, the way Lorraine wanted, the way I had practiced for 27 years. Appetizers came. I had the crab cake. It was excellent. $22 for a crab cake the size of a hockey puck, which is the kind of economics that makes sense only in restaurants where the value proposition is not the food, but the feeling of being the kind of person who can afford not to notice what the food costs. The main course. Steak for me. Lorraine had the salmon. Lawton had the duck. Judge Kincaid had the lamb. The conversation flowed around me the way water flows around a rock. Smoothly, naturally, without the water ever acknowledging that the rock is there. Graham asked me one question during the entire main course. So, Calder, what kind of properties do you manage? Residential and commercial, various locations. In Richmond? Mostly. Cool. Cool, the conversation equivalent of a pat on the head. Then Graham turned back to Sybil and didn't speak to me again. Lorraine glanced at me once during the main course. The glance said, "Good. You're being quiet. Keep it up." I kept it up. I ate my steak. I drank my water. I watched the table the way I have watched rooms for 27 years, cataloging behavior, noting hierarchies, measuring the gap between who people perform and who they are. Lawton performing for the judge, Lorraine performing for the Kincaids, Graham performing disinterest because surgeons perform disinterest the way professors perform intelligence, automatically, without thinking about whether it's appropriate. And then the toast. The plates were cleared, dessert menus distributed. Lawton stood up, glass of wine in his hand. The room shifted, 8 people turning toward the man at the center, which is Lawton's natural position and the position he has been engineering all evening. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This dinner is about family, old family and new family coming together. Sybil and I are excited about the wedding, and meeting her parents has been one of the great honors of my life. Judge Kincaid, Rosalind, thank you for raising the woman I'm going to marry. I can't wait to be part of the Kincaid family. Applause. Genuine. Lawton is good at this. The smoothness, the sincerity that is either real or perfectly manufactured depending on how well you know him. Then Judge Kincaid stood. His turn. He picked up his wine glass and walked around the table, a habit I would later learn from his years on the bench. Judges walk when they speak. It's how they fill a courtroom. It's how they fill a room. He passed Lawton. Lawton, welcome to the family. He passed Sybil. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. He passed Lorraine. Lorraine, thank you for being here. He passed Graham. Son. He passed Roslyn. My love. And then he reached me. He stopped. The way a record stops when the needle hits a scratch. The walk ceased. The social smile, the politician's smile, the judge's smile, the smile that is designed to make rooms comfortable, faded. He was looking at me. Not the way you look at a stranger. The way you look at someone you recognize in a context that makes no sense. The way you would look if you walked into a gas station and saw the governor pumping his own gas. Hello, he said. His voice had changed, not louder, more careful. The voice of a man who is aware that what he says next is going to reshape the table. I'm surprised to see you here. The table went quiet. Not gradually, instantly, the way rooms go quiet when the most important person in them changes direction without warning. I looked at Judge Kincaid. He looked at me, and I saw the question forming on his face before he asked it, the question of a man who is genuinely, deeply confused by the gap between what he knows about me and how the table is treating me. Do they know who you really are? Dead silence. 8 people. Not a dessert spoon clinking, not a wine glass moving. The question sitting in the center of the table like a grenade that nobody knows whether to touch. Lorraine's face went through 3 stages in approximately 4 seconds. Confusion. Why is the judge talking to Calder? Alarm. Who you really are. Is Calder in trouble? Terror. What has my husband been hiding? Ambrose, I said, first name basis. The table registered this, the property manager calling the judge by his first name. Another crack in the narrative. I don't think tonight is the time. Calder, you're sitting at the end of this table being treated like a guest who arrived by accident. Your wife introduced you as a property manager. Your brother-in-law seated you next to my wife because it's the farthest seat from the conversation. And I have sat across from you in my chambers, in the building you own, discussing a $14 million renovation that you funded personally. I am not going to sit here and pretend I don't know who you are. $14 million. The number landed on the table like a brick through a window. The building I own, Lorraine said. Her voice was thin. The voice of a woman who is hearing information she cannot process. Judge Kincaid looked at Lorraine, then at me, then at Lorraine again. And on his face was the expression of a man who has just realized that he has revealed something he assumed was common knowledge, and that was, in fact, the most closely guarded secret at the table. You don't know, he said, not to me, to Lorraine. You don't know who your husband is? He's a property manager. Mrs. Meade, your husband is the sole owner of Meade Holdings, a private real estate investment firm operating through 14 subsidiary companies across Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. His portfolio includes 67 commercial properties. He purchased the Jefferson District Courthouse, the building where I have presided for 28 years, through his company Monument Equity Partners in 2019. He personally funded a $14 million renovation of that building. I know this because I sat across from him in my chambers during the renovation process and discussed the specifications of my own courtroom with the man who was paying for it. He looked around the table. At Lawton, whose face had gone the color of the tablecloth. At Graham, who had stopped performing disinterest. At Sybil, whose eyes were wide. At Roslyn, who was watching the scene with the particular calm of a woman who has been married to a judge for 40 years and has seen many verdicts delivered but never one quite like this. The man you seated at the end of the table, Judge Kincaid said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of 28 years of courtroom authority, is one of the largest private real estate holders in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and you introduced him as a property manager. The room was not breathing. I could hear the kitchen through the service door, the sound of plates being stacked and water running, the mundane soundtrack of a restaurant continuing its operations while a dinner table 11 feet away was experiencing a structural collapse. Lorraine was looking at me. The look was not one look, it was a sequence. Confusion gave way to calculation, which gave way to something I hadn't seen on her face in 18 years of marriage. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of what she had done. fear of every dinner party, every introduction, every time she had flattened her voice on the words property management and pivoted away from me like a woman distancing herself from a stain. Calder. Her voice was barely audible. Is this true? I looked at my wife. The woman I had married in 2007. The woman who had ironed my shirt tonight because she didn't trust me to do it myself. The woman who had called me at 1:30 p.m. and told me to keep my mouth shut because Judge Kincaid was too important for me to risk embarrassing her in front of. You told me to keep my mouth shut, I said. So I did. Calder, how is this possible? You make $68,000 a year. You drive a Toyota. I drive a Toyota because I like the Toyota. I wear khakis because I like khakis. I live the way I live because it is how I choose to live. The $68,000 is what I pay myself from one of my 14 companies. It's the amount that maintains the life you see. The life you don't see, the 67 properties, the $440 million portfolio, the $28 million in annual net income that exists in the part of our marriage you never looked at. I never looked. Calder, you hid it from me. I didn't hide it. I structured it. Every property is in an LLC. Every LLC is managed through a registered agent. My name doesn't appear in public filings because that is how private real estate investment works in Virginia. You didn't know because you didn't ask. In 18 years, Lorraine, you have never once asked me about my finances beyond the monthly household budget. You have never asked to see a tax return. You have never asked how we own a $680,000 house with no mortgage. You have never asked why we have no debt. You accepted the surface because the surface confirmed what you already believed, that I was a man who manages properties and isn't worth bragging about. The table was still. Lawton was looking at his plate. Sybil was looking at her father. Graham was looking at me with the expression of a man who is fundamentally reassessing everything he thought he understood about the person sitting next to him. Judge Kincaid spoke again, quietly. I owe you an apology, Calder. I didn't realize that your family was unaware of your business. I assumed everyone knew. In my experience, men with portfolios like yours don't typically keep quiet about it? Yes. My father was a janitor, Ambrose. He mopped floors for 31 years and nobody knew his name. My mother served food that hundreds of children ate every day and nobody said thank you. I grew up watching invisible people provide the services that visible people stand on. And when I started building wealth, I made a choice. The same choice my father never had. I chose to be invisible. Not because I was ashamed, because I wanted to know who the people around me really were when they thought I was nobody. I looked at Lorraine. And I found out. Lorraine stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound of wood on marble, sharp, final. She walked out of the dining room, through the lobby. I don't know if she went to the restroom or to the parking lot or to the bar. I know she left the table because the alternative was sitting there while the full weight of 18 years of misplaced shame settled onto her shoulders in front of the judge, the surgeon, and the brother-in-law, who had all just learned that the man at the end of the table was the most powerful person in the room. Judge Kincaid sat down. The dinner, as a social event, was over. What remained was the debris, the half-eaten desserts, the full wine glasses, the particular silence that follows a detonation. Lawton spoke first. Calder, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Lawton. You've been consistent. You've treated me exactly the same way for the entire time I've known you. Politely, dismissively, with the kind of courtesy you reserve for people you consider beneath you, but want to remain civil toward. That's useful information. I appreciate it. You didn't mean anything by it. That's exactly the point. You didn't think about it. You seated me at the end of the table without thinking. You talked over me without thinking. You've spent 20 years knowing me, and you have never once asked me a question that required a substantive answer. That's not malice, Lawton. That's indifference. And indifference is worse than malice because malice at least requires the effort of noticing someone. Sybil, Lawton's fiancée, the woman whose father had just detonated the evening, reached across the table and touched Lawton's arm. Not in comfort, in warning. The touch that says, "Stop talking now." Judge Kincaid and I exchanged a look. The look of two men who have been in rooms together before, his chambers, during the courthouse renovation, discussing courtroom specifications and security layouts and the particular needs of a building where justice is dispensed. In those rooms, we had been equals. In this room, the table had arranged us as unequals, and the judge had simply refused to accept the arrangement. "I'm sorry this happened this way," he said. "Don't be. I've been waiting for something like this for 27 years. I just didn't know the catalyst would be a dinner with my brother-in-law's fiancé's father. Life has a sense of humor. Life has a sense of timing. The humor is optional." Rosalind, the judge's wife, leaned toward me. She had been quiet the entire dinner, which I now understood was not disinterest but observation. She had been watching the table the way I watch rooms, cataloging, noting, measuring. "Mr. Meade," she said, "I have a question." "Of course." "Why did you marry a woman you were testing?" The question hit cleanly. No padding, no politeness. The question of a woman who has been married to a judge for 4 decades and has learned to ask the question that cuts to the center. "I didn't marry a test subject, Mrs. Kincaid. I married a woman I loved. The testing happened afterward, not by design, but by default. When you hide your wealth and your wife starts treating you according to what she thinks you're worth, you don't have to design an experiment. The experiment designs itself. Every dinner party, every introduction, every "he's in property management," each one was a data point. And over 18 years, the data accumulated into a pattern I couldn't ignore. And the pattern told you what? That the woman I married values the appearance of success more than the substance of character. That she is ashamed of the man she thinks I am. And that the shame is not about me. It's about her. It's about what she needs other people to see when they look at her life. That must be lonely. It is the loneliest experiment I have ever conducted. I found Lorraine in the hotel lobby. She was sitting in a wingback chair, holding her phone, staring at the screen without seeing it. Called her. "Lorraine. $440 million. Yes, for 18 years. For 27 years. We've been married for 18 of them. And I let you be yourself, without the influence of the number. I wanted to know who Lorraine Presley was when she thought she was married to a man who made $68,000 a year. And I found out." "What did you find out?" "That you're ashamed of me. That you have been ashamed of me for most of our marriage. That you introduce me the way you'd introduce a piece of luggage you forgot to check. That you tell me to keep my mouth shut at dinners because my voice, my actual voice, saying my actual thoughts, is an embarrassment to you." Called her. "That's not—" "Lorraine, at 1:30 this afternoon, you called me and told me not to embarrass you. Those were your words. Don't embarrass us like you always do." You have been saying some version of that sentence for years. The only thing that changed tonight is that someone at the table knew the truth and said it out loud. Why didn't you say it? If you're worth $440 million, why did you let me spend 18 years being ashamed of you? Because the shame is yours, Lorraine, not mine. I am not ashamed of the Toyota. I am not ashamed of the khakis. I am not ashamed of being introduced as a property manager because I am a property manager. I manage 67 properties and I do it well. The shame you carry is about what other people think of you for being married to me. And that shame existed before the money, independent of the money, and would have existed even if I had told you the truth on our wedding night. Because the shame is not about my net worth. It's about your need to be seen as someone who married well. And in your definition of well, a man who wears khakis and drives a truck and doesn't perform success at dinner parties will never qualify. She was quiet for a long time, sitting in the wingback chair in the lobby of the Jefferson Hotel, a building constructed in 1895 by men who believed that the appearance of wealth was wealth itself. And she was learning, in the worst possible way, in the most public possible setting, that the man she had been hiding for 18 years was the one person at the table she should have been showing off. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. That's the first honest thing I've said to you tonight that doesn't involve a number. Can we fix this? I don't know that either. I know that I love you, I know that the love has been carrying weight it shouldn't have to carry, and I know that tonight changed something that can't be unchanged. The money doesn't matter to me, Calder. The money has never mattered to me either, Lorraine. That's what I've been trying to show you for 18 years, and you never saw it, because you were too busy being ashamed of the man who wasn't showing it. 3 months have passed. It's January 2026. The marriage is in counseling, not resolved, not divorced, in the messy, painful, honest middle that exists between revelation and resolution. Lorraine is angry, not at the money but at the deception, which she calls a betrayal, and which I call an experiment, and which our counselor calls a failure of mutual vulnerability. All 3 descriptions are accurate. None of them are complete. Lorraine has asked me in counseling why I didn't trust her with the truth. It's a fair question. And my answer, because I needed to know who you were without it, is honest but incomplete. The complete answer, which I have not yet said out loud, is because I was afraid. Afraid that if Lorraine knew about the money, she would become someone different. Someone who performed love for the lifestyle rather than feeling it for the man. And the tragedy is that by hiding the money, I never gave her the chance to prove me wrong. I assumed the worst and built a system to confirm it. The system worked. The assumption held. And now I'll never know if it would have held if I'd trusted her from the beginning. That's the cost of the experiment. Not the dinner, not the embarrassment, the not knowing, the permanent, irreversible, not knowing whether the woman I married would have been different if I had been honest with her from the start. Lawton has not spoken to me since the dinner. The engagement to Sybil Kincaid is proceeding. The wedding is in June. I have not been invited, which I understand. I detonated Lawton's engagement dinner, even if I didn't light the fuse. Judge Kincaid and I have lunch once a month. We meet at a diner on Broad Street, not the Jefferson Hotel, because both of us prefer diners, which is the kind of thing you discover when you stop performing and start eating. He has become, unexpectedly, the closest thing I have to a friend who knows both versions of me. "Do you regret the experiment?" he asked me last week, over a turkey club that cost $11.50. I regret the loneliness. The experiment itself told me the truth, and the truth is useful. Is useful the same as good? No, but it's what I have. Calder, can I tell you something? Of course. I've been a judge for 28 years. I've seen people lie under oath, hide assets in divorces, forge documents, and deceive the people closest to them. And in all of those cases, the person doing the hiding believed they were protecting themselves. But they were always, every single time, also punishing the person they were hiding from. You hid your wealth from Lorraine because you wanted to know who she was. But you also denied her the chance to be who she could have been with the truth. And that's not an experiment, Calder. That's a sentence. I looked at the judge. The man who sits in my courthouse, in a courtroom that I renovated, dispensing justice with the particular authority of a man who has spent 28 years deciding what's fair. You're saying I sentenced my own wife. I'm saying you gave her a test she didn't know she was taking and judged her for failing it. And now you're both serving time. He's right, I know he's right. The experiment was not neutral, hiding. The money was not passive. It was a choice. An active, daily choice to withhold information that would have changed the power dynamics of my marriage. I chose to be invisible because I wanted data, and the data came at the cost of a marriage that might have been better if I had been brave enough to be visible. I am 52 years old. I own 67 properties. I am worth $440 million. I drive a Toyota Tacoma. I eat turkey clubs at a diner. And I am sitting in a counselor's office every Tuesday afternoon with a woman who is trying to decide whether to love the version of me she just met or resent the version of me who hid for 18 years. My mother called last week. Opaline Mead, 76, Petersburg, the only person who has known the truth since the beginning. How's Lorraine? Angry. At you? At both of us. At me for hiding it. At herself for not seeing it. Calder, I told you 20 years ago the hiding was going to cost you. You were right. I'm always right. I just don't have $440 million to prove it with. Mama, I'm serious. You built something extraordinary, baby. You did it with your father's hands and your mother's patience, but you hid it because you were afraid of being seen. And being afraid of being seen is just being invisible on purpose. Your father didn't choose to be invisible. He was made invisible. You took what was done to him and you did it to yourself. And now you're doing it to your marriage. What do? You stop hiding. You let her see you, all of you. The Toyota and the $440 million, and the boy from Petersburg who mopped floors with his daddy and decided he would never be looked through again. Let her see that boy, because that boy is worth more than 67 buildings. And if she can't love that boy, then she can't love you, and you'll know for real this time. Not because you hid something, because you showed everything. She's right. My mother is always right. I haven't shown everything yet, but I'm starting. One conversation at a time. One Tuesday counseling session at a time. One dinner at a time where I don't perform invisibility and she doesn't perform shame, and we both sit at the table as the people we actually are. It's slow. It's painful. It's the hardest renovation I've ever done. Harder than the courthouse. Harder than any building in my portfolio. Because the building I'm renovating now is a marriage. And marriages don't have blueprints. They have two people and a table, and the willingness to stop performing and start building. The judge told me something at our last lunch. He said, the strongest buildings aren't the ones that never crack. They're the ones that crack and get repaired. The repair is what makes them strong. I'm repairing. I don't know if the building will hold, but I know this. The man at the end of the table is not invisible anymore. He's been seen. And now the question is not whether the world knows who Calder Mead is. The question is whether Calder Mead can live in the light after 27 years of choosing the dark. I'm trying. That's all I've got right now. I'm trying. I didn't tell this story for applause. I told it because somewhere out there, a man is sitting at the end of a table, keeping his mouth shut, wondering if the people around him would treat him differently if they knew. And somewhere, a woman is introducing her husband with a voice that fades on his job title, not realizing that the man she's fading is the man she should be amplifying. If you're the man at the end of the table, stop hiding. Not because the world deserves your truth, because you deserve to stop carrying it alone. If you're the woman doing the introducing, ask yourself, would you say it differently if you knew? And if the answer is yes, then the problem isn't what he does for a living. The problem is what you do with the information. Subscribe if this one stayed with you. The next story is already written. It just hasn't been told yet.